The thing about fear is that it rarely announces itself. It doesn't knock on your door. It doesn't introduce itself. It just appears, quietly, patiently, watching, and by the time you realize something is wrong, it's already too late. It started with a decision that didn't feel dangerous at all. Just temporary, just practical, a place to stay. After everything fell apart, after being pushed out of a home that never really felt like his, he had nowhere else to go. No savings, no backup plan, just one option. His grandparents' farm, miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by acres of crops that stretched endlessly into darkness. A place where silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, oppressive, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The house itself felt frozen in time. Dust settled into every corner like it had claimed the place. Old religious paintings lined the walls, eyes that seemed to follow you no matter where you stood. The smell, it lingered. Not just age, but something deeper, something stale. Something that didn't feel right. Still, it was better than nothing. At least that's what he thought. For the first few days, nothing happened. Routine settled in. Work during the day. Dinner with his grandparents. Sleep in that quiet, suffocating room. But on the second week, something shifted. He got home late that night. The sky was already swallowed by darkness, and the only light came from the faint glow of the porch bulb. As he reached for the door, he heard it. Movement. Not close. Out in the crops. At first it was subtle, just a disturbance in the stillness, but then clearer. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Now farms get trespassers. That wasn't unusual. People steal produce, cut through land, it happens. But something about this felt off. The rhythm wasn't right. It wasn't someone walking. It was lower, closer to the ground. He stepped away from the door, moving quietly toward the edge of the field. Every step careful, every breath controlled. And then he saw it. Something moving between the crops. But it wasn't standing. It was crawling, on all fours. Not like an animal. No, too controlled. Too intentional. It moved with purpose, like it knew exactly where it was going. Like it knew he was there. He froze. Every instinct told him not to get closer. Not to call out. Not to make a sound. So he did the only thing that made sense. He went back inside. His grandfather didn't hesitate. The moment he heard, he grabbed his rifle and stormed outside, shouting into the darkness with a fury that echoed across the fields. Threats, warnings, promises of violence. And just like that, the movement stopped. Gone. As if whatever it was had vanished. That should have been the end of it. A strange encounter. A story to laugh about later. But fear doesn't work like that. It doesn't leave. It lingers. The next night, it came closer. He woke up to a sound. Soft, faint, but unmistakable. Laughter. Not inside the house. Outside his window. His eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. And then, he saw it. A figure, standing just beyond the glass. Watching. Not moving. Not hiding. Just staring. There's a specific kind of fear that hits you in moments like that. Not panic. Not yet. Something colder. Something deeper. The realization that you are not alone. He sat up slowly. And the moment he moved, the figure reacted. It turned and walked away. Not ran, not rushed, just walked, calmly, like it wasn't afraid, like it knew. It didn't have to be. This time, his grandfather was furious. Not just angry, enraged. The kind of anger that comes from feeling violated, from knowing someone or something has crossed a line. He grabbed the rifle again. But this time, it didn't go the same way. The door barely opened before something lunged. Vast, violent, targeted. It grabbed his grandfather's leg and pulled. Hard. He hit the ground instantly, the rifle slipping from his hands. And then chaos. There was shouting, struggling, a body in the dark, another presence emerging from nowhere. And suddenly, there wasn't just one intruder. There were two. The second one moved quickly. Too quickly, striking his grandfather before disappearing back into the night. No hesitation, no fear, just violence, and then nothing. By the time the authorities arrived, there was no one left. No footprints, no signs, nothing, except one detail that changed everything. The cameras. After that night, his grandfather installed them across the property, facing the fields, watching the darkness, waiting, because whatever was out there hadn't come by accident. It had been watching, learning, waiting, and now they were watching back. But here's the part no one talks about. The part that stays with you. The part that doesn't make sense. Because when they reviewed the footage, they didn't just see movement in the crops. They didn't just see figures crawling in unnatural ways. They saw something worse. At certain points during the night, the figures would stop, completely still, and slowly, they would turn, not toward the house, not toward the cameras, but toward something else, something deeper in the fields, something that never appeared on camera, as if even they weren't alone. And that's when the fear changed, because it was never just about intruders, or trespassers, or people doing something illegal. It was about something hiding in the dark, that even the things you fear are afraid of too. And once you realize that, there's no going back. Because the truth is, we like to believe the world makes sense, that danger has rules, that fear has limits. But sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what you see. It's what's watching, from just beyond it. And this was only the beginning. There's something deeply unsettling about silence. But there's something even worse than silence. A sound that shouldn't be there. A voice that isn't supposed to reach you. A signal that crosses a line it was never meant to cross. It happened on a night that felt completely normal. No tension, no warning, just another evening that blended into the dozens before it. He had been out late. Nothing unusual, just a small gathering with family. Laughter, food, the kind of warmth that makes you forget, even for a moment, how unpredictable life can be. By the time he got home, the world had quieted down. The streets were empty. The sky was still. In the house, felt safe. A note was taped to the front door. Simple, ordinary. Take the trash out. Inside, the lights were off, everyone asleep. He moved carefully, trying not to wake anyone. There's a certain calm in moments like that, when the world feels paused, like nothing could possibly go wrong. But calm can be misleading. He grabbed the trash bags and stepped outside again, walking along the narrow path that led to the side of the house. That's when he heard it. Voices, faint at first, muffled, coming from the backyard. He froze, not out of fear, at least not yet. More like confusion, trying to make sense of something that didn't belong. Because no one should have been there. Not at that hour. Not in their yard. He moved closer. Slowly, carefully, every step deliberate. And then he looked over the fence. 2 people, standing near the patio table. Not moving. Not talking loudly. Just there. The kind of stillness that feels wrong. Like they weren't supposed to be seen. That's when fear kicked in. Sharp, immediate. The kind that doesn't ask questions. It just tells you. Run. He didn't hesitate. Back inside. Up the stairs. Straight to his mother's room. There's something terrifying about waking someone up with fear in your voice. Because it spreads instantly. You don't need to explain everything. They feel it. They stepped into the hallway together. And that's when everything escalated. Footsteps. Coming from downstairs. Not outside anymore. Inside. They didn't have time to think. Didn't have time to plan. Only react. He pushed his mother toward the window. Urgent. Desperate. There was no other way out. She hesitated. Of course she did. Anyone would. But fear has a way of forcing decisions. She climbed out onto the narrow ledge. Heart racing. Hands shaking. And just as he followed, the bedroom door opened. They were inside. He didn't look back. Didn't want to see their faces. Didn't want to know how close they were. He dropped down to the grass, grabbed his mother, and they ran. No direction, no plan, just away. They reached the neighbor's house, pounding on the door like their lives depended on it. Because they did. That night changed everything. Police reports, statements, locks checked over and over again. But the worst part, nothing was taken. No robbery. No clear motive. Just 2 people who came into their house and left. That kind of uncertainty lingers. Because if it wasn't about stealing, then what was it about? Time passed. Slowly. Painfully. But eventually, life tried to return to normal. Or at least, something close to it. Until the phone rang. 3:00 a.m. There's something universally disturbing about that time. Too late for normal calls. Too early for anything good. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. Sharp. Persistent. Unforgiving. It didn't stop. Ring. 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 Minutes passed. Still ringing. They stared at each other. Neither of them moving. Because somehow, they both knew. This wasn't random. 10 minutes. 10 full minutes. Of nonstop ringing. Finally, she snapped. His mother walked over and pulled the cord from the wall. Silence. Instant. Heavy. They didn't sleep that night. How could they? Because deep down, they both felt it. This was connected. The break-in. The presence. The feeling of being watched. And now, this. The next morning, they tried to rationalize it. Wrong number. Glitch. Something explainable. Until her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. Just a few words. Why didn't you pick up? That's when reality shattered. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. Whoever had been in their house knew them, knew their number, knew when they were home, knew when they were asleep, and worst of all, knew they were scared. Fear changes people. It rewires the way you think, the way you move, the way you exist. Every sound becomes suspicious. Every shadow feels alive. Every moment alone feels dangerous. They started noticing things. Small things, easy to dismiss if you weren't already afraid. Objects slightly moved. Doors not quite how they remembered. The subtle feeling of being watched. But here where it gets worse. Because one night, the phone rang again. Same time, 3:00 a.m. But this time, they didn't let it ring. They answered. Silence. At first. Then, breathing. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Not a word. Not a whisper. Just presence. And then, a sound. Laughter. Soft. Distorted. Familiar. The same kind of laughter he heard that night outside the farm window. Different place. Different story. Same feeling. That cold realization that something connects these moments. Something unseen. Something that moves without being noticed. The call ended. Just like that. No explanation. No trace. And when they tried to call the number back, it didn't exist. Not disconnected. Not unavailable. Never existed. So what do you do when something reaches into your life from nowhere? When it breaks the rules you thought reality followed? You try to ignore it. You tell yourself it's coincidence, bad luck, a series of unrelated events. But deep down, you know, because fear like that doesn't lie. And the worst part, it didn't stop. Because what they didn't realize yet was that the call was never meant to scare them. It was meant to test something, to see how they'd react, to see how far it could go. And now that it had their attention, it was ready to get closer. Much closer. There's a certain kind of fear that feels distant. The kind you experience through stories, through screens, through things that happen to other people. And then, there's the kind of fear that lives with you, sleeps beside you, breathes in the same air. The kind that doesn't chase you, because it doesn't have to. It's already inside. She was only 14, old enough to stay up late doing homework, young enough to still believe her home was the safest place in the world. It was a school night, the kind that drags on forever. Assignments unfinished, deadlines creeping closer. She woke up suddenly. No alarm, no noise, just that strange, instinctive jolt, like her body had remembered something her mind hadn't. Homework. She sighed, reached over and turned on the lamp. The soft glow filled the room. Everything looked normal. Too normal. She glanced at the clock. 1:15 a.m. The house was silent. The kind of deep, undisturbed silence that only exists when everyone else is asleep. She grabbed her pencil, started writing. The quiet scratch of graphite against paper filled the room. And then, something interrupted it. A sound. At first, she thought it was nothing. The house settling, pipes shifting. Normal things. Explainable things. But then it came again. Clearer this time. A dragging sound. Slow, heavy, coming from inside the walls. She stopped writing, held her breath, listened. There it was again. Not random, not accidental, intentional, like something was moving. Inside the walls, fear doesn't always hit all at once. Sometimes it builds, piece by piece, layer by layer. Her heart started to race. Her grip tightened around the pencil. She looked toward the corner of her room. The storage panel, a square-shaped door built into the wall, usually ignored, usually forgotten. But now, it felt different. The sound was coming from there. Closer. The dragging turned into something else. Faster, more frantic, like whatever was inside was getting closer to getting out. She screamed, called for her parents, voice cracking, desperate. And that's when it happened. The panel moved, just slightly at first. A shift, a crack, and then it burst open. What came out was not what she expected. Not something supernatural. Not a monster. A man. Tall, overweight, pale. His hand clamped over her mouth instantly, silencing her. The kind of silence that feels violent. Her screams became muffled, desperate, panicked. His breathing was heavy, uneven, too close. And in that moment, everything slowed down. Because this wasn't fear anymore. This was survival. Her parents heard it, even through walls, even through distance. Footsteps, running, fast. The door burst open, and everything turned into chaos. Her father didn't hesitate, didn't question, didn't think. He attacked, punch after punch, fury driven by something primal, something protective. The man didn't fight back much, didn't even try to escape immediately. Almost like he hadn't expected resistance. Almost like he thought he had more time. But he didn't. Within seconds, it was over. Police arrived shortly after. The man was arrested, taken away, and for a moment, it felt like it was done. Until they searched him. What they found made everything worse. Because in his pockets were items that didn't belong to him. Things he had taken, collected, including pieces of clothing from her. That's when the truth hit. This wasn't random. He hadn't just broken in that night. He had been there before, inside the walls, watching, waiting, for days, maybe weeks, learning their routines, their habits, their weaknesses, knowing exactly when to strike. And suddenly, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a trap. But the story doesn't end there. Because fear has a way of leaving behind questions. Questions that don't have answers. Like how he got in. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No unlocked doors. So how does someone enter a house and live inside its walls without being noticed? The investigation revealed something chilling. There were gaps, spaces between the walls, areas not shown on the original building plans, old construction, forgotten designs, hidden access points, a perfect place for someone who didn't want to be seen. And once you realize that, once you understand how easy it is, you start to wonder, how many homes, have spaces like that? How many people have heard sounds in the walls and ignored them? How many times has something been closer than you think? Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. We trust walls. We trust doors. We trust the idea that we're protected. But protection is an illusion. And sometimes, the thing you should be afraid of isn't outside trying to get in. It's already inside, waiting, listening, and learning. But what makes this story even more disturbing is that it wasn't the only time something like this happened. Because somewhere else, in a completely different place, someone else started hearing noises too. Different house, different life, same kind of fear. But this time, there wasn't just something inside the walls. There was something under the floor, and what they discovered would make them question reality itself. There's a point when fear stops feeling like fear. It becomes something else, something heavier, something that doesn't just scare you, but changes the way you see the world. Because once you realize that something impossible is happening, you're left with only two options: deny it or face it. They had just moved in. A fresh start, a new chapter, a quiet house in a quiet neighborhood. The kind of place people dream about. Safe, comfortable, predictable. At least, that's what it looked like on the surface. The first few nights were normal. Unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, laughing about how empty the rooms felt. But then, the sounds started. At first, they were subtle, easy to ignore. A faint shifting noise, a soft thud, the kind of thing you brush off. Old house, settling wood, pipes. But the sounds didn't stop. They got louder, more frequent, more deliberate. And the strangest part, they weren't coming from above. They were coming from below. But that didn't make sense, because the house didn't have a basement. He checked more than once. There was nothing beneath them. At least, nothing that should have been there. Still, every night, the same sounds returned. Dragging, scraping, and sometimes, something that sounded like breathing. That's when the tension started building. Sleep became difficult. Silence became unbearable. Because silence meant waiting. Waiting for the noise to start again. And it always did. But fear doesn't just live in sound. It shows itself in other ways. Subtle ways. Things slightly out of place. Doors that were closed, now open. Objects moved, just enough to notice. Her closet. Every morning, it was open. No matter how many times they shut it the night before. No matter how carefully. At first, they blamed each other. You left it open. No, you did. But eventually, that excuse stopped working. Because deep down, they both knew something wasn't right. So they decided to stay awake. To listen. To wait. To finally understand what was happening in their home. The hours passed slowly. Midnight, 1:00 a.m. The house was still, silent, and then it started, louder than ever before. A deep, dragging sound, followed by something else. A low, almost human moan. He got up, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at him to stop. But curiosity can be stronger than fear. He walked downstairs, step by step, each creak of the floor echoing louder than it should. He reached the den and pressed his ear against the wall. The sound was clearer here. Closer. Too close. It wasn't coming from beneath the house. It was coming from inside the walls. But lower. Deeper. Like there was something just out of reach. He stepped back slowly. That's when he noticed something. The closet. Her closet. It was open again. But this time, something was different. There was a gap. A space that hadn't been there before. Behind the clothes. Behind the wall. A door. Small. Hidden. And open. The air that came from it was wrong. Cold. Stale. Like it hadn't been touched in years. Or worse, like it had been recently. He grabbed a flashlight, his hands shaking slightly, and looked inside. A ladder leading down, farther than the light could reach. That's when fear truly set in. Because this wasn't imagination anymore. This was real. There was something beneath their house. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. He told her to lock the door, call the police, and then, against every instinct telling him not to, he started climbing down. Each step felt heavier. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. The darkness swallowed the light, until finally, his feet touched the ground. He searched for a switch, found one, and turned it on. The room lit up, and what he saw didn't make sense. A table, a chair, a small bed in the corner, and scattered across the floor. Toys, children's toys, old, worn, but not forgotten. It looked like someone had been living there. Recently. That's when he heard it. A scream. From upstairs. Her voice. Panic. Terror. He ran, climbing the ladder as fast as he could. Heart racing. Adrenaline taking over. By the time he reached the top, the door was breaking. Someone was forcing their way in. Wood cracking. Splintering. And then, a face, pushing through the gap. Dirty, unkempt, eyes wild, watching him, seeing him. For a split second, everything froze. And then, the man saw the weapon in his hand and ran. Just like that. Gone. Vanished into the night. Police arrived soon after. They searched everything. The room, the house, the surrounding area. But they didn't find him. No identity. No trace. No explanation. Just questions. How long had he been there? How did he get in? And the most disturbing question of all, was he the only one? Because that room, that hidden space beneath their home, it wasn't built recently. It had been there for years, waiting. And if they hadn't heard the noise, if they hadn't stayed awake that night, they never would have known. They would have kept sleeping, living, existing, completely unaware that someone was living just beneath them, listening, watching, waiting. And the scariest part, he didn't break in that night. He was already there. And he only came up because something changed. Something made him act. But what? What causes someone to leave the safety of hiding and suddenly reveal themselves? Was it desperation? Or something worse? Because sometimes people don't act on impulse. Sometimes they act on opportunity. And if that's true, then maybe they weren't just being watched. Maybe they were being prepared for something. And somewhere else, in a completely different place, someone else was about to come face to face with something far more disturbing. Not hidden, not quiet, but standing right in front of them, smiling, waiting. There's a moment when fear stops being about survival, because survival implies something simple. You either escape or you don't. But what happens when you do escape and it still doesn't end? When the danger doesn't stay behind you, but follows you, closer, quieter, patient, because some things don't need to chase you. They just wait, and eventually, they come back. It started with a job, simple, quiet routine. He worked nights as a janitor in a high school. Alone, almost always alone. The kind of job where hours blur together, where silence becomes normal. At first, he liked it. No distractions, no noise, just empty hallways and the steady rhythm of work. But empty places have a way of feeling different at night. The same halls that felt harmless during the day felt endless in the dark. Lights buzzing overhead, footsteps echoing too loudly, and that strange feeling, like you're not as alone as you think. Still, he ignored it, until one night, something changed. He was cleaning one of the classrooms upstairs, music playing faintly from a radio down the hall. Everything normal, until a light turned on, across the building. Not flickering, not malfunctioning, turning on, deliberately. He froze, because he knew something important. He had turned that light off, himself, just minutes ago. The hallway stretched between him and that room. Long, silent, and then a figure appeared, standing in the doorway, watching him, not moving, just staring. There's something deeply disturbing about being watched from a distance, because it gives your mind time to imagine, to question, to panic. He stepped closer, slowly. The figure didn't move, didn't hide, didn't react. It just stood there, until it raised its hand and waved, slowly, calmly, like it knew him, like it had been waiting. That was enough. Fear took over. He shut the blinds, stepped back, tried to breathe, tried to think. And when he looked again, the light was off. The figure was gone. That's when instinct kicked in. Run. He didn't grab his things, didn't lock up. He ran, down the stairs, out the door, into the night. Didn't stop until he was far away. But the story doesn't end there, because the cameras caught something he didn't see. Later, when security reviewed the footage, they found him, the man, emerging from the basement, not breaking in, not forcing entry, coming from inside, walking through the halls, calm, unhurried, like he belonged there. And then he stopped, right in front of the camera, and smiled, a slow, unnatural smile, before turning and walking back into the basement. But when they searched it, there was no one there. No exits, no hidden doors, nothing. He had simply disappeared. And that's when things stopped making sense. Because this wasn't just a person anymore. This was something else. Something that didn't follow rules. Something that appeared when it wanted to and left without explanation. But even that wasn't the end. Because far away from that school, on a quiet stretch of road, someone else had their own encounter. One that almost didn't end in survival. It was late, a shift ending, a routine drive home. Nothing unusual, until a truck pulled up beside them. At first it seemed harmless. A man asking for help. Spare chain. Gas money. Normal. But something felt off. The way he looked. The way he spoke. The way the woman beside him just smiled. Not friendly. Something darker. Something wrong. They gave what they could. Tried to leave. But the truck didn't go away. It followed. That's when fear returned. Real fear. The kind that doesn't whisper. It screams. The road stretched ahead. Empty. Dark. And the truck stayed behind them. Closer. Closer. Until they reached a gas station. Safe. Or at least, it should have been. They stopped. Tried to breathe. Tried to calm down. And then, headlights. Pulling in. The same truck. Blocking them. No escape. The window rolled down. And that smile returned. Only this time, there was something else. A weapon. A gun. And in that moment, everything slowed. Time stretched. Because this was it. This was the moment where everything could end. But instinct is powerful. He reversed. Hard. Vast. The sound of impact. Glass cracking. A shot fired. But somehow, he got away. Drove. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. Until he was safe. Alive. But changed. Because once you come that close, you don't forget. You can't. And that's the pattern in all of these stories. Different people. Different places. Different lives. But the same feeling. The same realization. That danger is never as far away as we think. That safety is often an illusion. And that sometimes the things we encounter don't just disappear. They linger in places, in memories, in the back of your mind, late at night, when everything is quiet. Because maybe, just maybe, these weren't isolated incidents. Maybe they were connected, not by people, not by location, but by something deeper, something that exists in the spaces we don't understand. The gaps, the shadows, the places just out of sight. And if that's true, then the real question is, are these stories real? It's how many more are out there, waiting to happen? Because tonight, when the lights go off and the world goes quiet, you might hear something, a sound, a movement, a feeling, and you'll tell yourself it's nothing. You'll try to ignore it. You'll try to sleep. But deep down, you'll remember this, and you'll wonder, what if it's not nothing? What if something is already there, watching, waiting, and unlike you, it doesn't need sleep.